instead, I took the bishop. Now, at first, this looks very risky. However, this ends up being very, very strong for black, mainly because of the weakness on g2. So he plays queen takes c6. I play queen d4 check. He plays king h1. I play bishop b7. So now, of course, he can't take b5 because I can take g2 with check, winning the queen. So he has to retreat. And now, once again, I had a very tough decision. At first, it looks like keeping the queens on is best, with either queen g4 or queen h4. Of course, queen g4 rather hangs the knight, so I got to play queen h4. But then, it turns out things are not so simple, as he can play knight d2, and next move knight f3, and my queen has nowhere to go. And if I have to take the knight with the bishop, things are not so nice for me, especially with my king a little airy. I need to keep the a8, h1 diagonal open for my bishop. So I make the decision of trading queens. However, his king is not out of hot water yet. Knight takes c3. Rook g8. So now he's forced to play rook f2. Rook g1 is simply way too passive, and he's just asking to get mated. However, after rook f2, b4, knight e2, knight a4 does not turn out much better for him. Knight g4, rook f4. Of course, rook f1, knight e3 is very strong. So knight e3. Knight g3. He'd love to take this pawn, but of course, bishop takes g2 check would simply win a rook. So he needs a move. Also, rook takes g2 is a killer threat, so he has to block my rook. However, at first, it looks like he's surviving. After knight takes g2, rook takes b4. However, I have a very nice tactic to win the exchange now. Knight f4 check. And here he played rook takes b7. The idea I had was after king g1, knight h3 check, king f1, and now not bishop g2 check, as after king takes g2, rook takes b4, king takes h3, he'd actually be up 2 pieces for rook, but I played bishop a6 check. And then, after rook takes a6, I play rook takes b4. And although, of course, it isn't easy, I am up the exchange. He decided, however, that the best way to lose the exchange in this position was to take on b7. Rook takes b7. So now, do not let this fool you. This is not an easy ending to win. Although I'm up in exchange, 2 of my pawns are doubled, so effectively he's up a pawn on the queen side. And his bishop on b3 sort of holds everything together for him. And exchange up positions are very rarely easy to win. And this one certainly isn't. So I still had a really long task ahead of me. However, you have to say that although this isn't an easy win, it probably is either close to winning or winning for me, which makes the opening a real success. So I will conclude by showing how I finished it. So after rook takes b7, rook takes b7. So again, I'm in a probably good ending. The opening was a real success, and I'm up way on time because I knew it better than he did. Of course, I was lucky he walked into a line of press, but hey, these things happen eventually. So he played rook a4, a very nasty-looking move. However, I have a very nice response, which is knight d3. Very nasty-looking move. So now, if he takes, of course, rook takes b3, and I'm simply cleaning up all his pawns. And he really has to keep his bishop. So after knight d3, he plays bishop takes f7. And I throw in knight takes b2, attacking his rook. So if bishop takes g8, knight takes a4, I'm simply good. He has to keep the rooks on the board. Almost 4. So he plays rook e4, threatening to come into the 7th. I play rook d8. Then he plays rook e7. So it looks like he's gotten some serious counterplay. However, it's not so easy for his bishop to come around and attack h7. So things, although it looks a little shaky, my position does hold up. So after knight d1, I have to get my knight back into play. My knight, although taking b2 is worthwhile, the the knight has to come into play, otherwise I'm going to be in trouble even. So he plays bishop b3, not allowing my rook to penetrate. So I play knight f2 check, king g2, knight g4, and he plays knight h5. So he's trying to play f6 now. So here I find some tactical solutions to my problems. I play rook b5. So now if he takes on c7, I take on f5, and his knight really doesn't have a happy place to go. And then I penetrate to the second on f2 after knight g3. So he played h3. And now, once again, tactics come in my favor, as I have the very nice resource, rook e5. So now, if he plays rook takes c7, I have knight e3 check, and rook takes f5, which is very good for me, as again, his knight just simply has nowhere good to go. And if king f3, rook takes f5 check, king takes e3, rook takes h5, I take h3 next. Although it may not be that easy, it should be a winning ending. Therefore, he played f6, defending his rook. However, I have the resource, knight e3 check, king f3, rook takes h5, king takes e3, rook takes h3 check, king f4, c5. I don't want to give him that pawn now, because he has f6, which is very dangerous. So I cannot allow him to have c5, rook c7, rook c3. So really, he's just losing unless he can somehow get his bishop to attack h7. That's going to be key for him. So he plays king e5. So again, very dangerous situation. My king's in the corner. I'm up in exchange, but my two rooks aren't quite coordinated as yet. So I have to be very, very cautious in finishing off here. So I push my pawn. I need to have room for my king. Also, I need to have a passed pawn going, so I have counterplay for all his central play, his f-pawn, etc. So he plays bishop d5, so he's trying to reposition his bishop. However, I first saw this, and saw that I could actually take this d2 pawn, which looks suicidal, but believe it or not, I have an idea. So after bishop e4, I play rook f8, or rook f2, rather. So now, he takes h7, so this looks almost suicidal. King g8. So now, f7 is impossible because I take it. And if he takes h5, which looks like it should draw, I have rook e8 check, and after king d5, rook d2 check, I win his bishop, which is a rather nasty surprise, which I think he didn't see, as he was a little bit low on time right now. So, as the only way he can not lose his bishop immediately is bishop g6. So, now we were a bit low on time. However, I managed to calculate a very, very long winning sequence, which is very, very tricky. So first, it starts with a very key move. So obviously, if f7 check, king f8, rook h8 check, king e7, rook e8 check, I'm going to be in some trouble. Maybe even losing almost. So I have to get that out. So I play rook e8 check. Little sneaky check. So if bishop takes e8, king takes h7, bishop takes h5, I play rook d2 cutting his king off, and I should probably be able to win this, although it's not very simple. This is probably his best try. However, he probably wanted to win this himself, but also, perhaps through the time trouble, he didn't see the ending to this. So he actually miscalculated here, and didn't play his best drawing chance. After rook e8 check, he played rook e7, which looks very nasty. However, it actually gives me a forced win, although it's certainly by no means simple. So rook e2 check, king d6. If bishop e4, I play rook takes e7, F takes E7, King F7, winning the E-pawn and winning pretty easily, as I can even sack for his bishop next move. So he plays King D6, Rook takes E7, F takes E7, H4, very important. I do not want him to take the H-pawn and then queen, so he queens. Rook takes E8, Bishop takes E8. So it looks like he's achieved the draw. However, my pawns are just a bit too fast for him. C4, King E5, he really has nothing better. So now if H3, King D4, he draws. However, I have C3, Bishop G6, H3, King D4, H2. And the pawns are a bit too fast for his king. So believe it or not here, what he actually did was he claimed that I played 2 moves in a row, as we were playing very quickly, as we were both quite low on time. Him a lot more than me, actually. But I was excited, because I'd never beaten a GM before, so I was playing very quickly. And he thought I played 2 moves in a row, so we went, we played the game, he saw that I didn't, and he actually just resigned right there. He was pretty good about it. But anyway, so it was a pretty exciting win, very good opening preparation, and my first win over a GM. So I I just learned this line, actually, before this game, so I learned that it was a very, very dangerous line, if you know what you're doing as black. Of course, not all my games were this successful with it, believe me, but overall I found that it was a very, very nice opening, a great surprise weapon against almost any opponent, even a GM caliber such as this. So anyway, this is my first lecture on hopefully many on this opening. And I will maybe next time go over some of the D3 variations, some of the main line, and perhaps a few little tidbits for you. So I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe